so bear with us as we do our little technical bit, and we'll get you to Mike, and he can introduce himself.
I had to unmute myself. I had to make a few adjustments to make sure that we're going to be able to share some sounds from some of the items I'll be showing tonight. So first, I want to welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out and sharing your time with us this evening. As you heard, all these groups have come together to build up the technology ecosystem here in Southwest Florida, as well as across Florida and the United States and globally. These Zoom links are available to anybody that joins our meetup pages. They can attend from anywhere. We've had that happen. And as you heard, it's free. We do this out of our own pockets. We want to help everybody learn new things, network, be able to ask questions. So that's why we exist, and we want to build these communities. And I think everybody, all these community leaders here are doing a fantastic bang-up job. So thank you all again for showing up tonight. This won't be a deep dive into the technology. This is really just scratching the surface. There's so many things that we could talk about when it comes to AI, the things that you've heard in the news, the things that you haven't heard in the news, and other stuff. But for now, I'll just go ahead and get us started. So my name is Mike Long. I'm one of the engineering principals on the product security team for Arthrex, which is a medical device manufacturer located out of Southwest Florida. It is also a global company. I'm also the founder and organizer for SWFLSec and SpaceCoastSec. The great thing tonight is we also have our co-leaders here with us tonight for SWFLSec. You've already heard one of them, and that's Megan. So feel free if you're in a physical meeting space to go talk with her afterwards. Also, Matthew is here tonight, who's my co-lead at SpaceCoastSec. And if you're on the virtual side, feel free to ping him in the chat. So what are we talking about tonight? We're going to be talking about misinformation, deepfakes, and AI. Oh my, it seems like a huge topic, right? We're going to try and break it down, give a few examples of these different things, and maybe some potential solutions or what people are thinking about that might be solutions for this. But first, who am I? So you've already heard a bit about that. You can find me on some of the socials. This is just a sampling of some of my social locations. You can find me on Twitter at CMLong. My LinkedIn link as well. I'll drop these in the chat at some point, or somebody can grab them and drop them in the chat. And then my experience, I've been in the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, medical devices, and IT for going on 22 plus years now. I know there's some folks here who've been doing it a lot longer, and there's some that are just fresh to it. So this is why we build community, is to learn from each other. And then certs wise, I've got the A+, Sec+, CISSP, CIPM, and CIPPE. Working on others as it goes with technology. You just kind of got to keep learning. So, and I like to say, like, I'm a professional student. So I love to just sit down and learn. And as you heard, I'm a product security person, but here I am tonight talking about AI. And AI is going to touch all of our lives. And, you know, it could touch us from a product security standpoint. So it's good to learn about it, right? So first off, disclaimer, this is the first presentation I've ever done where I've actually had to have a trigger warning. And we have this trigger warning because the following content is going to discuss sensitive topics that may cause distress or discomfort for some readers, including political polarization, mental and physical abuse, controversial healthcare topics, hate speech, and radicalization. The content's also going to reference violent extremism and terrorism, which may be disturbing to some readers. I should have changed that because everybody's here present. I'm the one that's reading. Additionally, the content includes may include explicit language and derogatory terms that may be offensive to some audiences. So there you go. Just be aware some of this is very sensitive for some folks, and I just want you to know going forward some of this information is going to come up. So the Free Dictionary defines the above phrase, misinformation, deepfakes, and AI, oh my, or X, Y, and Z, oh my, you might hear it said. It's used to express all apprehension or fear regarding the presence, combination, or abundance of three particular things. A lot of us those of us here that are old enough may have watched The Wizard of Oz, a film that came out in 1939, and that's where this phrase originated from: lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And the sense here is, when we're discussing this on the topic tonight, is yeah, there's a bit of all. Like, you hear people like, I don't know how this stuff works, and it's really scary on some stuff it can produce because it feels real, right? It may even trick people into thinking this is a real person that they're talking to or typing to or chatting with, right? But it's also this apprehension and fear behind it. You hear that in the media all the time, that the AI is going to kill everybody's jobs. It's going to kill all humans. It's going to end the earth, all these types of things. And so, it's one of those things where we got to be careful what's real and what's not. And this topic of misinformation, deep fakes, you'll see it's getting harder to determine if it's real or not. And we'll talk a little bit about things that people can look for. But with that said, it's stuff that this capabilities existed before even AI. So Konrad Gessner, who's a respected Swiss scientist, he published a book in which he warned the modern world was overwhelming people with data, and that this overabundance was both confusing and harmful to the mind. I mean, do you feel like that now? I mean, it seems like we're being hit from all sides with data, whether it's the news media, if we're absorbing it through newspapers still, or through TV, radio, podcasts, the internet. It's just coming at us from every direction. And now we got AI on top of that, right? But we also have Adrian Ballet, I'm probably totally butchering his name, who said that we have reason to fear that, and I put a blank here because it's going to be interesting. We have a reason to fear that, and we can just toss AI in here. We have a reason to fear that AI, which grows every day in a prodigious fashion, will make the following centuries fall into a state as barbarous as that of the centuries that followed the fall of the Roman Empire. Whew, that sounds really bad. That sounds like what the media is telling us, right? That AI is going to cause humans to go extinct. It's going to launch nuclear weapons, and we'll be in a nuclear winter soon, right? What was really said here? Books. We have reason to fear that the multitude of books, which grows every day in a prodigious fashion, make the following centuries, and so forth. Interesting, right? That was from 1685. Konrad Gessner, 1565. What he was complaining about was the printing press. This stuff applies today just as much as it applied back then. The fear of new media is something that occurs with every generation. This occurred with the advent of newspapers, the French statesman. There was a French statesman, and I don't remember his name, who railed against newspapers, believing that people should only get their news from the pulpit. When the radio shows came out, Gramophone magazine, and you can go to the Wayback Archive to find this, Gramophone magazine had an article talking about how the radio shows would ruin or rot kids' minds because they were splitting their time between their assignments and sitting in front of the loudspeaker to listen to these shows. They were no longer socializing. They were no longer going outside. And this was the downfall. And then later it became the moving picture and TV. And then there was the war against comic books and tabletop role-playing games. Video games were going to cause all of our kids to become murderers. So every generation has some form of media that this fear becomes present. Even school, when we moved into the classroom-based schooling, there was resistance to that it would treat our kids like they're prisoners, which some may argue it does, but I digress. So all these different situations have never come to be, and usually what happens is the next generation, by the time they come on board and they're absorbing this media, everything's normalized. Nothing bad happened, and they go on about it. And then as they move through their generation, the next media comes up. We're at that turning point now with AI. We're seeing a lot of fear and just resistance against it. Going to admit people. And so what are we going to do? Are we going to accept it? Is it going to change us in some way? It might actually make us more productive. Is it going to take jobs? Probably, but guess what? It's going to create new jobs too. So do we need to fear AI? There might be a good spoonful of it that we need to have, right? Spoonful of fear, just to keep in the back of our minds that don't let it run rampant, don't let it get out of control. But do we need to fear it completely? That we need to block it, that we need to use it, that we need to stop the research? I don't think so. I think this is our next media, our new form. So with that, moving forward, let's talk about deepfakes. So as a lot of you know, you probably know what deepfakes are. They're videos or audio recordings that are not real. They look real. They look like somebody you may know. They may sound like somebody you may know. And they're usually used to convey some meaning to or the public in doing something. They're usually used to possibly damage someone's reputation or scam someone, maybe cause mental harm, sway the public's opinion, or advance political agendas. We heard quite a bit about this around the voting, the last two voting sessions for the presidential race, right? That somebody is manipulating the political agendas. Somebody's creating these campaigns. How do we believe that that's real anymore? So recently, there was a scare that President Biden was invoking selective service. Never been done in the history of the US to invoke selective service. We had to draft, of course, but then the selective service was created and we've never had to do that since. But all of a sudden, because the war in Ukraine, Biden was shown to be saying that he was going to implement selective service immediately. And I have a clip here to share that. Hopefully the sound will come through. Let's get to the right point here. All right.
The illegal Russian offensive has been swift, callous, and brutal. It's barbaric. Putin's illegal occupation of Kyiv and the impending Chinese blockade of Taiwan has created a two-front national security crisis that requires more troops than the volunteer military can supply. I have received guidance from General Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that the recommended way forward will be to invoke the Selective Service Act, as is my authority as president. The first to be called in a sequence determined by national... We
won't need to play the whole thing there, but some people were convinced that this was happening. Social media blew up when this happened. And the problem with that is it may be fake, but when you have also fake accounts, which we'll talk about in a little bit, actually amplifying that message, and it just starts taking off, and then you've got bias from various leanings that will believe it as well, and then they'll share it as well to their groups, and this becomes an exponential explosion of this news, and it just takes on a life of its own. So until somebody finally came out and said, nope, that's the president didn't invoke that it was a scare. So then the Ukrainian president, President Zelensky, he urged Ukrainians to surrender to Russia.
Українці, шановні захисники, бути президентом виявилося не так вже й легко. Я змушений приймати складні рішення.
So kind of looks like him, kind of sounds like him. If you're native, looking at what people were writing about it, it looked like it wasn't believed. It didn't, luckily, right? But what if it was more realistic? What if it did actually sound like him? What if there weren't telltale signs on that video and the Ukrainians believed that Zelensky was going to surrender and was asking the citizens to do the same? Where would we be at today? So there's this danger here that with public figures like the president, that they can manipulate markets, they can manipulate the public into believing something. Those were deepfake videos, but how about deepfake audio? Recently, there was a mother who received a call, and the call was her daughter. And on the phone, her daughter was hysteric and said, the bad men have her. And then the bad men got on the phone and said, we want $1 million or you're never going to see your daughter again. And it's interesting because as a parent, for those of you who are parents, you uniquely know the voice of your children. It's a fingerprint that's burnt into your brain. And this mother thought this was real, so much so that she ran into dance studio to get other moms' helps. They were calling 911. They were calling, trying to locate the husband, to try and locate the daughter to see if she really had been taken. This ramped up very quickly. And even when they finally found her daughter, who was at home in her bedroom with her husband, she still didn't believe it was her because the voice was so real. It took 15 or more minutes of just back and forth. Are you sure? Like, how can you be in two places at once? It was that real to the mother. That's scary. And this is a scam that's actually occurring. It's growing right now, where people are being called by their spouses, by kids, by uncles, aunts, grandparents, parents. And usually it's somewhat of a similar type of scam. It's either been kidnapped or it's, hey, I was in an accident. I was the one that caused it. I'm in jail. I need bail money. You know, it's these types of scams, but it sounds like you are talking to that person. And because it's a family member and you know the voice and the technology is there. And so it's there and it's being used to scrape if that person has a presence on the internet, has recorded podcasts, has recorded videos, like we're recording this tonight. If somebody could scrape my voice, feed it through an AI deepfake audio analyzer, producer, whatever you want to call it, and push that back out, and could have me calling my wife saying, I'm in trouble. I need help. I need money. I need plane tickets. I need gift cards. You know? So that clip is, and we'll just play a little bit of it because it's, I know this can be sensitive stuff.
Tell your whole story, so don't worry too much about the clock. We're eager to hear from you, and you may begin.
Thank you so much. Not only invoke fear and terror for inviting me to be here today, social fabric, by creating doubt and fear in what was once never questioned, the sound of a loved one's voice. What is familiar? How many times have you received a phone call from your child and asked them to verify who is calling? How many times has a loved one reached out to you in despair and you stopped them to validate their identity? Did you hang up on them? Did you require to call them back to make sure you're speaking to the correct person? The answer is more than likely never. The sound of a loved one's voice is often never authenticated. It is a unique identity, as unique as a fingerprint. This familiar identity is innate. It is designed by God. It is what binds a mother to their child and a newborn infant to their mother. January 20th was a typical Friday afternoon for our family, kicking off a weekend of races and rehearsals. We often divide our family across the state. It's divide and conquer. My husband was with our older daughter, Bree, training for a ski race, and I was with my younger daughter, Aubrey, picking her up from a rehearsal at dance. Bree had not raced in years and promised me that she would take it easy. At about 4:53 p.m., I received a call from an unknown number upon exiting my car. At the final ring, I chose to answer it, as unknown calls we're very familiar with can often be a hospital or a doctor. It was Brianna sobbing and crying, saying, "Mom." At first, I thought nothing of it and casually asked her what happened. On the phone, I had the phone on speaker, walking through the parking lot to meet her sister. Brianna continued with, "Mom, I messed up," crying and sobbing continually. Not thinking twice, I asked her again, "Okay, what happened?" Suddenly, a man's voice barked at her, "Lay down, put your head back." At that moment, I started to panic.
Yeah, sorry, Zoom doesn't sync well with these. That's a problem with being remote. I'll be making all these links available, the slides available afterwards, so people can view these videos in full. As you can see on the C-SPAN video, even just talking about the incident, You can see she was already just going into that fight or flight mode, just thinking about it. And that's how bad it is. Just knowing that somebody could do that and trick you into believing that somebody has harmed somebody that's that close to you, a family member, a child, right? And then speaking of children, another big issue now, and glad I see some representatives here tonight. Nick, I'm going to call you out if you don't mind. The AI generated CSAM, or child sexual abuse material. So CSAM's already a big issue. It's a worldwide, it's global, and it's a horrible issue. Luckily, there's organizations out there like Innocent Lives Foundation, like Trope from I'm drawing a blank on his name at the moment. I'll think of it, and other sexual and human trafficking organizations that are trying to battle this every day. And now, on top of this horrible material that's being created for real, now they're having to deal with AI generated child sexual abuse material. And you see here, I've got some links that the IWF looked into this because of reports of this material being found online. Out of the 29 reported sites, they found 7 sites that actually had AI generated child sexual abuse material. So it's and it's going to just grow, unfortunately, with the technology that's become available. That's any person can get online and go to these various services, go to these generative AI art services, prompt it, and get a picture out. Now, a lot of these services like Stable Diffusion or Midjourney are trying to do things to battle against the production of sexual abuse material, child sexual abuse material. But as much as these companies try to battle against it, just like with regular cybersecurity, it becomes a cat and mouse game. When you think you've got improvements to prohibit these type of activities, the adversary just thinks of a different way to do it. Recently, the news.yahoo.com reported on the same situation where Discord, and you heard like a lot of us are on Discord, a lot of our kids may be on Discord even, but Discord was found to have hundreds of servers that were sharing child sexual abuse material, and out of some of those, it was AI generated material. So I'll supply these links afterwards, but Bilal Lakhani, again, probably pronouncing his name wrong. Oh, it's not Trope, it's Thorn, sorry. Vice President of Marketing Communications at Thorn said it can be difficult to combat an issue that no one wants to talk about and isn't always apparent. Child sexual abuse material is almost and Nick, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is one of these hidden issues, because and as Bilal states, I can't show the problem. I can't show the image. If we could just show the image, people get why this is as egregious as it is. But this material should never be shown. So it's hard for people to wrap their minds around just what it is and why this is an issue. But that's why we have groups like Thorn, like ILF, like the other groups that are out there across the world. They're battling against this and doing great work. But it's work that unfortunately seems like it's never going to stop. So enough of that. Let's move on. So misinformation can also be used to generate propaganda campaigns. The AI algorithms can analyze vast amounts of data to identify specific groups of people who are most susceptible to certain messages or narratives. By propaganda efforts to these people, disinformation artists can more effectively manipulate public opinion and undermine trust in institutions. I think everybody here has probably heard of Cambridge Analytica, right? This brought to the public mind exactly this issue. that this information was being scraped so that campaigns could be focused and tailored to specific groups, to manipulate campaigns, to manipulate voting. And now with AI and the strength of it and how much it's progressed, it's just going to continue to become an issue, to get worse. And I shouldn't say worse. I don't know that it would get worse, is it just becomes more efficient to produce. Let's put it that way. I want to pause here and say, remember, all of these things that we're talking about are things that could be done without AI. And they've been done for a long time without AI. Has AI brought anything new to the table? Not really. And what it has done is it made it more efficient. So now instead of having huge troll farms, you can do this with a much smaller group of people, and you're multiplying their effort through the use of AI instead. So things like amplification of false information online related to abortion medication is a propaganda campaign. It's a spreading of misinformation. PBS posted a short article on this. It was an interview talking about tracking and combating the rise and fall of online information about abortion. And this was around the recent court case of the drug, the over-the-counter drug medication, gonna not pronounce it correctly either, the mistrapinone or something like that, where they found that claims in the actual legal appeals themselves, the ruling that the Texas judge put forth, had at least 20 unique false or misleading claims, and those claims were the same ones that were out there being repeated on various social media platforms as well. So you can see this judge didn't even have the right information in front of them to make a good judgment, but yet they did, because they didn't realize that this was false or misleading claims that they were looking at. Now, luckily now the Supreme Court is looking into this, and there's an injunction now so the drug can still be sold. But that's how scary it can be, that these things can be passed as truth. Also, there's election ads already started. The Republican, what do you see, the RNC, is that the Republican National Committee, has a 2024 election ad that they submitted the same day or the day after President Biden announced his running for the next presidential election. And in that, it was a completely AI-generated advertisement. I don't know, some of you may have seen this, some may have not. You can see here it's right from the GOP. And I'll just play a short clip of it. We won't play the whole thing because
this just in, we can now call the 2024 presidential race for Joe Biden.
My fellow Americans.
This morning, an emboldened China invades Taiwan.
Financial markets are in free fall as 500 regional banks have shuttered their doors.
Border agents were overrun by a surge of 80,000 illegals yesterday evening.
Officials closed the city of San Francisco this morning, citing the escalating crime and fentanyl crisis.
Who's in charge here? It feels like the train is coming off the tracks.
So yeah, that was all AI. There was not a person involved in that YouTube video. Later, the GOP did come out and say they used the AI for it. At first, they didn't make that statement. But looking at that, you can see a lot of imagery was packed into that video. And they're definitely targeting specific groups of people in that video. They're also trying to drive fear and uncertainty by using that video. Again, this video could have been created without AI. It might have taken a little bit longer, but the use of AI allowed them to quickly put this together and quickly issue it at the time of the campaign announcement. Another one, talking about propaganda still, is the Russian state media, RT. They ended up amplifying a fake tweet that came out around the explosion at the Pentagon. And this also impacted financial markets, as we can see here from the New York Times. at the time the picture hit critical mass where enough people were seeing it, before it got retracted, before people were able to analyze it and prove it was not real, the stock market dropped. And you can see how it's got ringing as people are learning that it's not real, right? And it's the market's trying to recover from it. So between manipulating our society through misinformation and propaganda, it can also be used to manipulate financial markets. So an investigation around something like this activity could show where the person wasn't really trying to potentially say that there was an attack at the Pentagon. What they were trying to do is manipulate the market in a way where they could cause stocks to lower price, take advantage of that low price during that time, make their purchases, wait for it to turn back around, which it will as soon as it's discovered that this was misinformation, and then sell it back out and then walk away from it. So a lot of different angles to be aware of between propaganda, financial market manipulation. Yeah, Nick, thanks. The market manipulation graphic is wild. That's just crazy to see the ringing as it tries to recover. And that's like, thinking about how the spread of information occurs. And some people learn quicker than others that it's fake, or they hear about it for the first time. And you see that just happening across just that time period. So yeah, and I've got the images. Let's see. Yeah, here's the images. So these images, and also there was a fake account that was used. So Bloomberg feed, got a blue check mark, must be verified, must be real, right? Not anymore, because Musk certainly changed that. Anybody can buy a check mark for $8 now. This is a fake account. This isn't even Bloomberg, but close enough. And people thought this was real, that the Pentagon had been attacked, that there had been explosions. And this is what got picked up by multiple accounts and amplified across multiple platforms. And like I mentioned, the Russian state media outlet RT even picked it up. And they have a gold check wielding account. That's even more legitimate. It doesn't matter if it's Russia or not, right? If it's gold, it must be even more legitimate. So yeah. So I mentioned earlier, and we just saw an example of that, where there's fake accounts that can be generated. And in the past, you'll hear these accounts called bots or sock puppets. And these are accounts that somebody would take the time, or groups of people would take the time to create to be fake accounts, but still appear to be real. And with bots, they're usually easier to spot. They're usually posting the same message as other accounts, and so through analysis, you can usually detect that there's a bot activity going on until the messaging takes off, right? And then you may have real accounts that jump on that too, because they don't realize that this is a campaign of misinformation or disinformation that's going on. Sock puppets, on the other hand, are even harder to detect. And that's where an account gets created, and it's got a whole background as well. It may have hundreds of followers even. It may have a history that goes back weeks or months. It may post things, and it just looks, for all intents and purposes, like it's a real account. Somebody was behind making this, but now AI can be used to generate this. And recently, the SANS organization had a free webinar, and it's still out there. If you go to sans.org, you can look it up, called, I think it's AI and OSINT. I read the title, but that should get you close enough, where the presenter talks about this exact subject. And they show examples of using AI to generate 10 random names. And oh, by the way, I want them to be French names. Then pick one, and then, this person should have 3 hobbies and be going to university in Paris. Give me a background. And sure enough, the AI spits out a background, talks about the person's hobbies. And then, okay, so this person's gone on vacation to this location, and I want posts for 5 days with pictures. spits it out. You know, you may have to jump to a Mid-Journey or Stable Diffusion or other platform to get the pictures, but you get the idea. Now it's not somebody just sitting there thinking about how to do it, or going to platforms that am I human or not a human or something like that, where it may generate a fake profile, which those platforms are there too. Now it could get really creative and produce them at bulk, at scale, and you just can't tell that they're not real. It's much harder because of the history that could be built up around them. So some of those examples that have come up are things that, again, Ukraine's because it's Ukraine because it's in the news, right? That there's been campaigns of Facebook on Facebook and Twitter where there have been sock puppets and bot accounts that have spread a variety of different disinformation on there, from things like Zelensky creating a neo-Nazi state, you know, having that anti-Ukrainian messaging going on to try and make people more sympathetic to the Russian cause. As Twitter and Facebook have found these, they've removed them, but it takes time, and that time, unfortunately, is critical because other accounts and real accounts will pick this up. People who are biased in that direction will pick it up and amplify it, and then they'll repost it or retweet it, and then their followers will do the same. So another term for that type of activity that I think Facebook coined is called coordinated inauthentic behavior, or CIB. And they found additional campaigns where there was a Canadian company called Estraterra. So think Cambridge Analytics, but worse. The Estraterra, a Canadian-based PR firm, had created accounts to manipulate voting campaigns going on in South American countries like the Peronist Party in Argentina, and the Progressive Party in Chile, or the government of Venezuela during their voting time for president, where there was both support and criticism of the president. And both support and criticism of the president of Ecuador. So sometimes the bots or sock puppets will actually fight against each other because it looks like there's discourse there, there's discussion there, right? And that makes it look even more real. And this is a way to manipulate political campaigns and manipulate voting. So when that was found, those accounts were immediately removed. But again, this is an ongoing problem too, that these accounts will just pop right back up under different names and different histories, and it starts all over again. So some of you may remember that there was a story about how the Democratic Party was a bunch of pedophiles, and Biden was the leader of it all, and they were using Wayfair to sell cabinets, and that was a signal. And it was all done under the Save the Children hashtag. Well, the Save the Children hashtag originated from one of the trafficking organizations, anti-trafficking organizations out there, but it didn't get as much traction until the QAnon took it over and started posting their stuff under it. And because the original tag Save the Children was done by an anti-trafficking organization, and QAnon was using that for their pedophilia marketing campaign or misinformation campaign propaganda, it actually ended up amplifying the message then, and they ended up taking over that hashtag, and it was trending. And every time you went to look at that hashtag, it no longer went to anti-trafficking messaging and how people could get involved and help out and learn about the signs and stuff like that. Now it was going to the QAnon's stories talking about the Democratic Party and how they're a bunch of pedophiles. So, you know, again, this is some of the just small sample of what's going on out there. Some of the stuff has been done without AI, and while others have, and they're doing it much faster, much faster, and more efficiently to produce these campaigns, to produce this misinformation and deep fakes. So I think one other example here, and we'll start to wrap this up. I know I'm going a little bit long, but there's fake news. Everybody's heard fake news. Like, I think, we heard that a lot from Trump. Oh, news, it's all fake news, right? And all the old media, it's all fake news. They're just out there to get views. And now it's just part of our vocabulary, right? We all know what it is. But now there are sites out there that are completely generated by AI, all the way down to the individual articles that are being produced on a daily or even multiple times a day basis. Some of these sites are producing hundreds of articles a day, and they'll have names like County Local News or local business. I don't have the example here. Local business news, or this one, celebritiesdeaths.com, which actually posted that Biden had died and that Harris was taking over as active president, and they would have an address to the public at 9 a.m. Yeah, how much? We'll get to that in a moment. Thanks, Jason. So if we look at, here we go. So looking at the site, Celebrities Desk, it kind of looks like a standard, it's really like a standard WordPress site, but kind of newsy. Has all the things: privacy policy, terms of service, who they are, the archives, ways to contact them. Breaking, the White House has reported that Joe Biden has passed away peacefully in his sleep. Kamala Harris will now serve as the acting president of the United States and is set to address the nation at 9 a.m. Eastern. Imagine the impact if this would have got picked up to things like the stock market. We saw just with the explosion in the Pentagon how there was a blip, right? Now imagine something like this, which actually happened a few years ago. I couldn't, unfortunately, find the article. I wanted to find it for this presentation tonight. I forget if it was Reuters or the Associated Press, but one of the big news outfits actually posted something about the president being harmed in some way or assassinated or had died, and quickly retracted it. But because it was Reuters or Associated Press or one of the big news outfits, it was quickly picked up on the feeds of all the other news outlets and traveled. It got legs, and the market actually blipped for about, I think, not very long, maybe 30 seconds, 30 minutes, somewhere in 30 seems to ring a bell. But like I said, I couldn't find the article to bring it out. But if you do a search, I'm sure somebody could find it. Now, bring that forward to just back here on April. It was done. This was done on April 1st, but who looks to see what the date is anymore? And you can see here it posted on April 2nd, but I saw that there was some news announcements that actually listed it as the 1st. And this could have had a huge impact, not only the financial markets, but with our allies and with our adversaries. Has this left us defenseless without leadership? So that can be quite the danger. And then you saw, I think I skipped over it, here's County Local News. Again, kind of a similar layout. It's got very generic headlines. Sometimes it gives the location, sometimes not. And you can see a lot of the pictures are very similar. So some of these sites, easy to spot. We're going to talk about how do we defend against this. Well, just looking, you can kind of see everything's being a bit generic. It's all posted by admin. There's no attribution going on. And some of the pictures may not even look like they should be related to the article itself. And sometimes, and I don't see the example here, but when it's being AI generated, you'll run into things like what was on the Biden announcement. I'm sorry, I cannot complete this prompt as it goes against OpenAI's use case policy. So this was all automated, and OpenAI caught it, but it still got published. And what happens when you look at news feeds? You see just the headline. You see just breaking. Right? You don't see everything after it until you actually click into it. So, but different ways to look out for this type of messaging is look for if there's an AI responding that they shouldn't be doing this or they can't do it. If there's actual HTML code in there, because the adversaries or malicious groups are trying to make it so it's easily postable on the internet. So they'll say, like, generate this with HTML. And so you'll see the different codes in there as well. And other things kind of stand out. Similar phrasing, which we'll talk about in a minute too. And then, like you saw on this one, a lot of similar photos. Other sites that are these AI generated sites, they look like news sites. They have kind of similar colors of other well-known sites. There's a site that reposts CNN news, but they may twist it a bit. It's interesting that this is just going on, and then you find out that one of the things that's being done is not only is it creating these news articles to make it look like a news site, and it's going to try to drive traffic. It's also trying to drive traffic because it'll be full of advertisements, and they're just trying to bring in the ad views to generate revenue. I've got an ad blocker. Some ads are sneaking through on some of these examples, but for the most part, I have an ad blocker. So a lot of ads that may have popped up on here, if they have ads on here, just aren't showing up right now. Which is another thing I'd be careful of too, because as we know from security side of things, ads have been used also to spread malicious software through drive-by infections, where you go to a website, you're ad on that website, and that ad happens to be malicious in a way that it's able to infect your computer without installing something. Yeah, so all these different things going on. So what can we do? And first, I want to pause again, just to keep reinforcing the idea this is nothing new. AI is just making it easier. So I want to talk about what's called the Socratic warning. From Socrates, stated in one of his debates that this discovery of yours will create forgetfulness in the learner's souls, because they will not use their memories. They will trust to the external written characters and not remember of themselves. He's talking about paper, writing things down, and the fear of forgetting, because now you no longer have to remember it. We use the same argument for search engines. When Google got so good, we said, oh, people are going to start forgetting things. There was articles written about this because they'll just use Google. Guess what? Now you can remember other things though. So is this a problem or not? So even Socrates was thinking about things like this. So what do we do to defend against these issues? So there's a lot of smart people and smart groups out there. NewsGuard Tech is an organization that has been tracking things like fake news sites, and see if I have them up so I can give the example. I may not have pulled them up. Yeah, I didn't pull them up, sorry. Yeah, if you go to NewsGuard Tech, though, they talk through what they're doing to try to detect these news sites and then keep a list of them. So they got the AI tracking center now. And one of the things they use is GPT-0.me, and we can pull that up real quick. So GPT-0.me, and we can see here where you can take the text you're looking at, drop it in here, and check against these AI models, and it'll come back with letting you know, like, is this really AI generated or not? But who has the time to do this? Isn't everything we see on the internet true? So it's going to take part of our responsibility, as part of a shared responsibility, to understand that we shouldn't trust everything we're seeing. It's no longer what we hear or what we see, what we can grasp, right? Using our senses to determine if something's true or not. We got to get back, and we've heard this for years too because of other media. We've got to get back to the idea of using critical thinking and verifying sources, understanding that what we're looking at, it may not be the truth. It may be slanted, it may be biased, it could be fake, it could be AI generated, right? So looking at these different methods, whether it's using GPT-0 or other tools, using statistical analysis, looking for patterns like those pictures where I showed that a lot of the pictures are the same no matter what the article was. Looking for, it's almost like what we learned about phishing, looking for grammatical errors. Does this sound right? Now AI is getting a lot better at writing things to the point where it's actually tricked peer-reviewed journals into posting research that never occurred. That was fake research, but it was passed as real. They had experts looking at this research, and nobody could find fault with it, and it got posted. It got published, right? So again, this is a shared responsibility. There's places like I think they're out of Carnegie Mellon, which is the Center for Security and Emerging Technology, who have written a 2-part article on this, or guidance, you might want to call it, about AI and the future of disinformation campaigns. And I've got part 2 linked here because it talks about threat modeling it and what can potentially be done, or what potentially needs to be done to help mitigate this threat, or this idea that AI can become so realistic in its responses that it's that we as humans are no longer able to determine what's real and what's false. Some of their suggestions were doing things like developing technical mitigations to inhibit and detect ML or machine learning powered disinformation campaigns. We've certainly heard different organizations and policymakers talk about the idea of watermarking. How can we insert something into AI generated material that then allows us to use technology to detect it's actually AI generated material? I think, Gina, you may have brought up the idea that what happens when other countries are using the same technology or generating their own technology, who don't need to follow US policy, who don't need to follow EU policy. Thanks for joining, Evan, I saw you. To their adversaries, they're anti-US or anti-EU. They're not going to stick watermark outputs. Why would they? They don't want us to detect that, hey, this is a misinformation or disinformation campaign. Hey, this is a deep fake, right? So that's a threat, external threats. Develop an early warning system for disinformation campaigns, or build a networked collective defense across platforms. This would require social media platforms to actually cooperate with each other. We have a hard enough time getting law enforcement to cooperate across the different branches that are out there. Now we want competitors to cooperate with each other. Yeah, we'll see if that happens. I'm a pessimist when it comes to that part, but maybe I'll be surprised, and they'll have tooling and an ability to communicate. Maybe they'll have a cyber fusion, but it's an AI fusion or AI misinformation fusion center where they can pull all that information together, and it's a cross group, cross corporate, cross company, cross competition group of people. Then maybe they put the early warning system together, and they can start watching for those trends, and see, is this misinformation? Is this fake? Does it need to be removed? Which begs the question, who's controlling the information too? That's certainly been on topic lately as well. Is censorship happening because certain messages, certain corporations may not want to get out there and promote? That's not a discussion for this presentation. So other ideas were examine and deter the use of services that enable disinformation campaigns. Again, getting back to different AI services that exist out there and how to protect the use of them by legitimate users versus adversaries. Integrate threat modeling and red teaming. So this is for my cybersecurity folks here on the call and in person. Let's do threat modeling and red teaming against AI models, and test them and see if we can get them to present something that is misinformation, that is a deep fake. That's going on today. You hear things like prompt engineering. There's a whole website now which has people's prompts that they've been able to use to break out of the controls that companies like OpenAI have put in place. So you can just go to the website, grab this prompt, and it'll break out of the current rule set or policies in place and allow you to do things that that the model shouldn't be able to do. And just a plug for the upcoming cybersecurity conferences out in Las Vegas in August. There is a village called AI Village who will be doing exactly this. They will be red teaming these models. They will be doing threat modeling. They will have capture the flag contests going on to try and break things like Google Bard, like Microsoft's version of GPT and so forth. So definitely keep an eye on the AI Village. They have their own website, and if their talks get published, you should be able to see the talks or head out to Las Vegas in a couple of weeks. Then other solutions: build and apply ethical principles for the publication of AI research that can fuel disinformation campaigns. So this isn't thinking about ethical AI. This is about the research that goes into building the AI, so much closer to the beginning, to the ideation of it, to the concept of it, right? Is when we have AI researchers publishing their research, is there a way to protect it against its use by adversaries? Establish a process for the media to report on disinformation without amplifying it. How can NewsGuard, for example, produce a list of these fake sites without actually driving traffic to those sites, which would amplify them in search engines, right? Thinking of SEO and stuff like that to amplify those messages, to drive that traffic. Reform the recommender algorithms that have empowered current campaigns. So think about the things that are being surfaced in your feeds right now on YouTube, on Reddit, on Twitter, on Facebook, and so forth. All the different social media platforms, they have their recommender that they use, and that's been talked about in the news too. It's easy enough to find the articles that talk about how things like Conservative Party used to think before Musk took over Twitter. Conservative Party accused Twitter of only amplifying the liberal messaging and downplaying, hiding, censoring conservative messaging. This is part of the algorithm that was doing this. So that, as one example of accusations that were flying about. Last recommendation: raise awareness and build public resilience against machine language enabled disinformation. So that goes back to what I was saying, as far as having that shared responsibility from a public side of things, from each of us as individuals. At this presentation tonight, like doing things to drive that awareness. This is happening around us, so that we can build up a resilience against it, so we can build up being able to see this going on, to be able to detect it, to use critical thinking in our approach to our everyday lives, in the news that we're ingesting, the data that we're ingesting. And then the Brookings Institute, they've got the Artificial Intelligence and Emerging Technology Initiative, and you can see, don't have them open, but you can look up them too, and certainly they've got similar ideas from their end that they're researching and trying to recommend policy and what could potentially be done to help protect against these technologies being used by adversaries to generate this misinformation, these deep fakes. So with that, I'm going to stop. That's my presentation for tonight. I know it's a lot of material. I dragged on a bit, so I thank everybody for those of you who stayed through it all. And I know there were some questions in chat, so I'm going to try to scroll back real quick. I think Jason, you've asked, how much do you think these fake articles are corrupting the data sets of AI platforms? So that's a great question, because we saw how OpenAI, when it came out back in November, had a data set, and it wasn't open to continuously being updated. I think with GPT-4 now, maybe, I think they've opened it so that it can be updated from information referenced on the internet. So yeah, there's certainly the idea that data sets can become corrupted if the ability or capability is there for the AI to go out and just absorb stuff as it comes across it. Because then the more this information is out there, the more this misinformation is out there, the more the fake news and disinformation is out there. If AIs are scraping this information, it may start tuning its response, because one of the things we talked about in the breakout room earlier was the idea of statistical analysis, and as part of these models, and determining what they're going to have in their output back to your prompt. And they're looking at things like, what's the next common word? What's the next common bunches of words that would come after what's being produced based on the context around your prompt, right? And we've certainly seen that with some early research. You know, there's the famous Microsoft Twitter bot that quickly fell down to becoming a very racist bot in its responses, and had use of some fairly derogatory language because of what people were feeding it, right? So that's something else. The thing about protecting against is how AI models are being used, how they're being generated, how they're being secured, which is a topic that we've talked about internally from our end too, and other regulatory bodies are talking about as well. When using AI to make decisions, how do you keep models from becoming corrupted? How do you keep the decisions repeatable? Keep the output repeatable. So let's see, are there any other questions? Let's see. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think one of the main challenges is the lack of incentives or the conflicting incentives for the different, I guess, stakeholders that are involved here. So I think you kind of alluded to that. If you're a social media platform, you probably want to emphasize or even maximize engagement with your platform. So actually this kind of content, this, inflammatory content is very engaging, right? Because it makes people angry and it makes them react very strong ways. So I guess from a policy perspective is interesting, right? Because there's every economic incentive for these platforms to not control this in any way, even though it can be harmful in some ways. But then even if there is a strong policy put in place that balances everything out, then it could, I think you also brought that up, limit free speech potentially or affect speech in some ways. And even if they were to regulate the models, they could also start now centralizing, I guess, the technology into the big players. So we already have OpenAI as like probably the biggest player. Then the next two are Google and Facebook. So it's almost like, should we promote open source development of these models? But then if we promote open source development, all those safeguards maybe are not there by default. So I guess from your perspective, the question would be like, what do you think is best to, I mean, I tend to think it's open is better, but I'd like to get your perspective on like, do you think promoting open source development of these technologies is the way to go, as opposed to having centralized companies that are developing this and then regulating those centralized monopolies, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question, Daniel, and thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I'm on the side also that to be open source. This research should be publicly available. The models, the large language models, the data sets themselves should be publicly available. There are other things to take into account in these decisions, such as privacy concerns. Because of the scraped data, it's already been shown that there can be PHI on it. I mean, social security numbers is a PII type of thing, right, that exists in it. So having these models and their data sets open source so anybody can review them can certainly help cut down on it. And I see what you're saying from a security perspective. Does that then still promote the issue of the use of the technology in a malicious way? I mean, we can look at it just like with any other technology, right? It's generally a double-edged sword. You can use it for greatness, but you can also use it for very evil things. One of the great examples that's out there, or about, I think it's out there, I think it's been released, right? It's the Oppenheimer. I think everybody's heard of the Oppenheimer film now, and the drive for nuclear technology, and similar questions being asked: is this really going to be a good thing or not? And then the atomic bomb came out of it, right? So here with AI, this is kind of like our nuclear moment, right? This is our atomic moment here. Is it can be used for good, it can be used for bad. If we have companies controlling this, I would be on the side that would be a bad thing, because we're allowing that control by a small number of big players. and that control can lead us back around to potential censorship, to the bias. I mean, we're already aware now because of research like with MIT, right, in the face recognition stuff, that data sets are biased. Even when we try as much as possible not to have bias, data sets and the algorithms are going to carry the bias of their creators, and it's a hard problem that's being researched. So if you're allowing a company to control this, or just a small number of companies control this, just imagine the harms that can occur because of that. And it's just one of those things where they're like, you've got Facebook or Meta, Google, OpenAI to say, oh, just trust us, right? We're doing the right thing to protect you. And certainly through history, that's been shown to be not the fact, right? So having it open source, having it available for anybody, sites like Hugging Face is an example of that, where models and data are available. There's other initiatives out there too. I think that's a great thing. I think then fear along those lines, though, is what happens when somebody wants to monetize that, because open source can be monetized. I think most of us know that. What happens when it starts being monetized? OpenAI started out as being open source, then it became closed and they monetized it. So what happens when you get these things that they drive to monetize it, and then we start seeing M&A? We start seeing consolidation of models and data sets back to maybe a small number of players again. And then we come back around to this issue. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch happen. But yeah, from my side of things, I come from the open source side, where I think it's the lesser of the evils, and having more eyes on it, more hands on keyboard on it, is going to help drive not only innovation behind it, but drive the security and privacy by design aspects of it too. Thanks for the question. Scrolling up. By the way, I'll be sharing the slides and links if people missed that showed up late. These will become available afterwards. Yeah, Glenn mentioned, I don't know if you're here still, Glenn. I know you mentioned with the earlier Biden video and the selective service, you could tell the lip movement and the audio didn't quite match. So there were some telltales there, but things are getting better to the point where you'll no longer be able to tell. It'll be perfectly synced up. You'll have to look for other indicators in those videos, whether it's partial words happening, weird resonances in the background, weird artifacts within the video itself. Those are other things to look for too. Yeah, Gina, I see you have a question. Curious if anyone here is using AI now in their work. If anybody is, feel free to speak up and provide an answer for Gina.
Hey, I'm Matthew. Yeah, I'm using AI. It's not in work itself, but we're making a video game. It's a, oh, I can just press once, perfect. It's a AI text-based adventure game. So it's something, we use ChatGPT, but we're going to use like an alpaca model that is our own. And then we also have this little technology we made, so it makes it a little bit smarter, and it costs less to store memories with it. But yeah, we are using it in that sense.
Great. Yeah, I liked NVIDIA's press release they did a couple weeks ago, where they had I think they were using either Unity or Unreal Engine, and they had an NPC that you could interact with, and it was very much you're chatting with them. There was no prompts you had to select. Like, it was just, you're just talking to them, and they can tell you what's going on in the area, give you help or hints or whatever. It's more organic then, and I like, as a gamer myself, I like where that's progressing, because I like the other idea that's been proposed, I think by NVIDIA and others as well, is the use of AI not only to drive unique conversations with the NPCs, the non-player characters, but also just drive quests, drive challenges, that can be unique, that even the developers themselves never thought of, but the AI comes up with it and assigns you this task, and you got to go do it to get the money or to save the prince or princess or whatever. I think it's really neat as a gamer that technology is coming.
Yeah, Mike, great presentation. My name's
Thank
Wes,
you.
and I work with a brewing company. I'm a part owner in a brewing company, and I actually use ChatGPT as kind of like a thought partner. So when I'm going over marketing strategies or trying to put together event schedules, I'll ask, based on this market and the people here and, what our lineup of beer is, what would be a good list of events to do and what would be a good way to market that. So that's just been kind of the way I've applied it in my day to day.
Hey, Mike, I have a question. Well, first of all, I was going to say I also use AI every day. I'm a software engineer, and actually Stitch Fix just gave licenses of Copilot to every engineer. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, question about like the case that you talk about, the mother that, received a phone call about the daughter being kidnapped. Do you have any tips on how to spot that? I mean, like visually we can spot some things, but how do you spot things that are audio generated?
Yeah, one of the things about audio generation and the technology behind it, it's certainly made it a lot easier to produce audio that just sounds correct. So how do you detect that it's not? Part of that, I mentioned a little bit earlier, is trying to listen for certain artifacts, whether there's a weird resonance going on in the background, or there's word clipping going on where the AI didn't quite generate the full word or the full sentence, and the rolling on, the speech patterns themselves, even to see if you can detect it. But the hard part is there with the example with the mother is you're put into a fight or flight state in that type of situation. And when you're put into that state, you're not thinking about listening for those things, because now you're thinking about, how do I get my child or family member out of this situation? You're put into the state of immediacy where you have to react. And it's mentally taxing, right? Your adrenaline starts pumping, your mind starts racing, all the what ifs, all the scenarios, like how is this happening? Because all you hear is in this example, your child on the other end of the phone in hysterics, and you hear somebody that is a supposed kidnapper that is going to harm your child. Like, how do you react to that in a way that you're able to stop and think, is this real? It would go back to that where I mentioned is building up that awareness and resilience and questioning, because even the mother stated right there at the beginning, we don't stop to verify it's our child calling us, because we've been taught, like as business people, right, when we're getting a phone call, or is as a individual person when we're getting maybe our cable company's calling us, or our bank is calling us. That's an even better example. Our bank or credit card is calling us. Is this really our bank or credit card calling us? But we don't have the immediacy at that point. We don't have that fight or flight situation, because it's just somebody that we're doing business with. So that is where you stop and say, let me get your phone number and call you back, right? You're not going to do that if it's your kid calling you. And she expressed that at the beginning of the presentation with the committee. So yeah, it's kind of like this where you learn if you've been through phishing training, phishing awareness, right? It talks about the it's phishing, but it's also, if you heard the terminology, vishing, which is voicemail phishing, and there's been cases of it now, not only just voicemail, but voice in general, where the CEO calls their assistant and says, hey, I need $100,000 wired to Fort Myers, this Fort Myers plumber to fix the plumbing at this office location, right? Oh, the plumbing's broke. We need to get somebody there. Let's get them paid so we can get them out there, right? And you don't stop and think. But we're being taught, hopefully most companies are teaching this now, is to stop and verify. Unfortunately, when you got people in power, like it's your CEO calling you, you may not stop and think about, is this really the CEO calling me? And similarly, in with your bank calling you, your credit card calling you, you want to stop and say, "Is this really you?" And see if they have an answer for that, or just ask, like, "Give me your phone number, I'll call you right back." Right? So it's just simple things like that. Protecting against these things, like this mother was exposed to, that's a lot harder, and it's a psychological thing.
Surely there must be things like, files have signatures, they've got tags, they've got things, and there's opportunity here, I would think, just like we've got antivirus software out there. Tags, something, maybe there's opportunity to create something that is able to read in the waves, where it was AI generated somehow, that they can tag it, filter it. And that becomes a new feature on phones. It becomes a new feature on visuals. Now, text itself is hard, I would think, but I would think photos and voice and stuff, we surely could figure something out there.
Yeah, and that goes back, thanks, Gina. That goes back to what I was about watermarking, or having a digital watermark embedded in these files that are generated. There's ways to do it, and unfortunately it goes back to that cat and mouse game, where once somebody figures out how that watermark is happening, then they can try to reverse engineer it and make it so it doesn't happen, right? Or we've got again companies that aren't beholden to US policy or EU policy or other allies policies, right? They have their own laws and regulations, and they don't have to put in a digital stamp. So adversaries, malicious people will go and use those services instead. So it's a hard problem to solve, and little things like that will help, but it won't be the complete answer. And sorry, I moved back to sharing because I want to end on a light note. So once we're ready to wrap up, if there's no further questions, I do have something a bit more fun to show. So anyway, this is a great topic and a great conversation. Again, happy to raise this awareness around these things and what's going on and what's coming, and just to be on the lookout and maybe get involved out there with different companies or different organizations like Brookings Institute, like Center for Security and Emerging Technology, like NIST or NIST here in the US with their AI risk framework and other AI research that's going on. Or if you're in the EU region, being involved with groups in the EU that are doing this research, or working with makers to figure out the solutions.
Hey, Mike. This is Marcos. I just have a quick question. Maybe, do you think the way the AI is going, like the data sets, will be like someone can edit it just like Wikipedia, like or what's your thoughts on like Wikipedia, because that's kind of open source, or well, not open source, it's open community, right? You think are you aware of any efforts like that going on?
Yeah, certainly. I don't see why somebody wouldn't be to edit the sets, but then it's a matter of getting people to use the edited set, right? Wikipedia is a fantastic example, just because the evolution of it, right, is just the one, to compete with encyclopedias. But how do you do that when you don't have sources? You don't have a way to verify, and they started requiring that, and then they have moderators, and then that's brought along issues of its own too. But AI side, it goes back to how do you control the data set that's being used with that model, and making it open source. Well, now you've made it available. Somebody can take the data set and manipulate it and repost it back out there. So yeah, there needs to be some control around that, whether, again, that's kind of, in your example, it's sort of a Wikipedia model, or it's like a GitHub model, right? Use GitHub or source control. So have data set source control that can track these manipulations, that can show the differences, and somebody then can look at it. I'm a huge believer that there still needs to be, with AI, there still has to be the human component. There still has to be a human verifier there somewhere in the chain to have that safety. That may be just my background speaking, because I've been involved in pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and been involved in quality functions where that's a quality function. You have a second verifier. So in this position, it would be the AI is your first person, and there's already been the research to put it together, to train it, to have that data. That's all happened. It's been validated, but you still have that second verifier to get that quality out of it, so that you can detect things like, is there an error here in its response? Is this going to cause harm in its response? Stuff like that. So yeah, there needs to be some control around it.
Okay, yeah, I agree. And just for my opinion is I don't think there's a good or easy solution to controlling that data. Because there's dangers if it's centralized, or dangers if it's anybody free for all. So that's my take on it. But thank you, Matt, Mike.
Yeah, sure, pleasure. I haven't heard model cards, Daniel. I'll have to look into that. Do you care to expand on it?
Yeah, there seem to be a few bodies that are this is coming out of a EU regulation, actually, that I think they tend to lead the way, especially around data privacy and those things. But the US has a few bodies too. I think they are, I can't remember their list. I'll send you a list, but there's a few frameworks that are trying to establish a series of objective measurements on things like bias, bringing more transparency to the model training process and all that kind of stuff. And there's actually a lot of work now on, there's a lot of different types of these model cards and standardizing them, and across countries, but in general. The challenge, as I mentioned, I think with all that is up to Meta or OpenAI to fill it objectively and honestly, right? So the idea is that with every release of a model, there'll be some sort of objective criteria that gets disclosed with it. But yeah, we'll still be at the mercy of whatever they want to report, I think, is the main challenge.
Yeah. That's great. I'll have to look into that. I hadn't heard about the model card, so I'm going to go dig into that a little bit. Thank you. So one more call. Is there any other questions? All right, well, if you think of questions afterwards, feel free to reach out. Again, these slides will become available not too long afterwards. I think they'll be posted on our meetup page. I think I saw Zarella or Crystal, somebody mentioned, and my social media information's on there. Feel free to reach out and connect. We can have additional discussions if you want. Be happy to. So with that, thanks again, everybody, for coming out. Like I said, I want to end this on a light note. Like I said, a lot of this information takes us into some spaces that are a bit scary, that can cause mental disruption or impact. So let's end on a good note. I'm sure some of you out there have heard of the Drake AI, the Drake song that was generated from an AI model. Actually, that's taken off now, and those models are available again if you go to Hugging Face, sorry. They're there. There's a Discord for it as well, that you can do it, and they've got a lot of different voices now. So there's people out there now that are generating songs that the original artist never sang. So think of it like cover songs. So they're generating covers by an artist on another song. So I wanted to grab a couple that I thought were fairly close and just play a couple quick clips, because this is being recorded. Actually, I'm going to stop because if we want to post this recording, it may get us denied to actually post it because of those other algorithms on YouTube and whatnot. So hang on, stop recording.